Introducing Creole landscape. In this oil painting, we are presented with a grand landscape that dominates the canvas with hills and trees. In this scene, two small men on horseback occupy the bottom of the canvas. They are traveling along a winding path that is actively being reclaimed by nature. The palette varies in colors of red, blue, and white. There is, however, an emphasis on green. Trees within the foreground have a painterly texture, as if they were composed in watercolor. Towards the midground, viewers are introduced to palm trees. They are emphasized in scale and form as they erupt from the blur of nondescript trees. Although oscillating in height, their general placement is intended to be eye level with the viewer. The top of the canvas holds a naturalistic depiction of hills, peaking and sloping. It is here that forms, such as the palm trees, shrink in size to provide a sense of perspective. A subdued patch of yellow is seen towards the top left, and a streak of red is seen within the top center, embedded within a hill. Finally, the form of the top of the canvas is defined through horizontal brushstrokes and miscellaneous colors of blue, green, and black. Tinting is applied heavily in hand with white brushstrokes. This results in a glowing, ambiguous body. A note regarding the artist. Carlos Enriquez is a noteworthy vanguard painter for being self-taught early in life. From 1920 to 1924, he received formal education in the United States prior to returning to Cuba. He produced Creole landscape in 1943. In the same year, Enriquez would compose a letter to Alfred H. Barr. In this letter, Enriquez would go on to frame the importance of implementing Cuba's iconography in a similar painting from 1941, quoting, "The royal palm tree of Cuba is not only a postcard motif as some of our painters have pretended, but it has infinite plastic qualities," end quote. This correlates with the lecture held on October 25th, 2023 at UCLA, The Vanguard Painters, First Generation. In this lecture, the class unanimously agreed that Enriquez's paintings utilize a loose brushwork to produce the translucent bodies which are implied to have motion. Carlos Enriquez's composition exemplifies his familiarity with palm trees. They tie back to his roots. It is apparent that Creole landscape is a vivid depiction of Cuba's rural territories. The two men on horseback are reminiscent to that of rural peasants known as Guajiro, as they adorn clean, rural attire in sun hats. The aforementioned streak of yellow can allude to Cuba's coast, while the red can refer to their bohío that is encapsulated in nature's overgrowth. There are no references to industrialization. Nature is depicted as a moving force that is actively trying to enclose the men's path. The royal palm trees are icons for Cuba's identity and have been historically depicted in many attempts to frame the picturesque, ideal Cuba as that of Miguel Arria's Cuban landscape. Peculiarly, there are some composition choices that align with William Gilpin's rules of creating a picturesque. The composition is mostly framed to guide the viewer. The foreground is dark, with shaded hues. A winding path guides the viewer to a brightened middle ground. Furthermore, the lack of extensive human cultivation contributes to these loose guidelines. To clarify, Enriquez was not attempting to replicate these 19th century practices under anti-separatist ideologies, nor conceal industrialization. He was rather interested in the Guajiro population. Such a depiction of the Guajiro as a spectacle is not new, as Enriquez openly practices this in a similar painting of a heroic depiction of a man and king of the Cuban fields. When reflecting on this narrative, Rosario Arandia Alvarado frames this narrative. She describes Enriquez's decision, in quote, as an admiration for a kind of essential, primitive quality that is believed to represent authenticity, end quote. This practice has been observed in other painters from Cuba's first generation of vanguard painters, such as that of Antonio Gatorno's Woman by the River. In the depiction of Creole landscape, Enriquez treats the Guajiro as a humble duo who are facing a treacherous path with nothing but their horses. On the end note, it is worth examining the most ambiguous section of the Creole landscape painting, the top of the canvas. Although it is likely that the Enriquez produced an abstract, painterly sky, could this be war perspective that unveils the ocean? The top left of the canvas depicts bodies that are reminiscent of the royal palm trees of the aforementioned streak in yellow. This is possibly a subtle depiction of the beach. If so, it would then taper into the horizontal brushstrokes. From here, one could argue the viewer would be left in a sense of awe and wonder, as perspective would then be folding in on itself, rather than from the bottom to the top. Nonetheless, Enriquez was ultimately unveiling the grandeur of Cuba's rural landscape outside of Havana, where the rural populations are pushing through the oppressive forces of nature itself just to get by.